Hi, hello everyone. Jasper, thank you so much for that introduction and way to set the tone for us here today. We've been here already for two and a half days now, and I think just about all of our speakers and presenters made note of the fine corner over here full of young chefs who, by the way, are listening very attentively, who are taking notes, who are having conversations on their own and being very critical. So we need to give them a little bit of credit for that. Thank you. You guys are doing great. Yeah. So again, over the last couple of days here, we've had these conversations of technology, of the use of AI, and how things like soft skills come into play, how education is evolving. We've discussed many times sustainability. Maybe we can highlight a little bit about the human sustainability. That's one of our points here. And then wellness, not to be forgotten, of course. So culminating to now this point here, highlighting our young chefs, I want to thank the panel, and let's carry on this conversation of moving forward, through this lens of this shifting workforce expectations, large-scale innovation, and then pressing issues such as sustainability. So thank you very much. Just firstly, I'm a culinary educator. I teach culinary arts in Calgary, Canada. I mentor, as Jasper said, I'm part of the Global Youth Development Team with the young chefs. Would you all please just briefly share what your role is with young chefs? What do you do for them, with them?
So I'm the Culture, Cuisine, Heritage, Food Committee chairperson for World Chefs. And I also do a lot of mentoring with the young chefs in the western side of Australia, and obviously supporting the eastern side as well. So, because that's where our future is at the end of the day.
So I'm Talent and Reward Manager for the Celtic Collection. So in total, that is 10 hotels across Wales. And being here for so long, it's always been a challenge to recruit chefs, but also it drives that passion to really get in with the next generation, going around schools around the country and really driving that message about how rewarding a career in culinary can be.
Hello everyone, I'm Chief Executive of Levy. Levy is an organisation that provides catering at stadiums, arenas and convention centres around the UK and Ireland, but also in Europe now as well. We employ an awful lot of young chefs. We try and provide career opportunities all the way through from graduates and apprenticeships. I'm delighted to be here as well. I'm a proud Welshman, and to sit on this stage and have such a prestigious event come to Wales, I think is fantastic.
Hi, I'm from the FAO. For those who do not know what the FAO is, it's part of the United Nations. It's the one part that is actually dealing with food security, with agriculture, with food, the future of food, and of course, as such, chefs have an extremely important role to play in this development of our food and the future of which. And I'm responsible for youth within this organization, and that's why it's a natural to work with the young chefs.
Okay, thank you very much. So then, given everything that's going on these days, all of the challenges and the disruptions, well, firstly, what are these disruptions, these global issues that you think are affecting your sectors, but also, of course, the connection with our future, with the young chefs? What should they be concerned about? What are they concerned about? Keto-san?
I mean, I'm happy to go. I think we sit at a very interesting time. I see huge opportunity, but huge risks as well. I think what you've already discussed across the last couple of days, we have to be concerned about climate change and what that means for sustainable diets for a growing population for the next 20, 30 years. We have to understand the impacts of GLP-1 drugs and what that will mean for the changing diets and menu composition across my business, but everyone's business over the next couple of years. I think adoption of GLP-1s is going to explode this year with pill formats, and what does that mean? I think there is a skills gap and a skills shortage of young chefs, but I think what we've tried to do as an organization is not de-skill the kitchen and show career development and show ambition in the style and type of food that we think will be there in the future. And around AI, look, I'm glass half full. I think AI will make a lot of the humdrum jobs in our industry become a lot easier. The administration, the forecasting, the labor scheduling. We are still going to need high quality, high value customer experiences that can only be provided by humans, and chefs and front of house staff are critical in that.
Perhaps in addition to the climate issues that you were mentioning, I think what we see today is a triple crisis, actually. We have an economic shock with supply chains being disrupted. We have, of course, the environmental shock, which is linked to climate, but also others. And we also have a major generational renewal shock. And I think Jasper was just saying that before. So we need to really try to look at how can we operate the future of our food in view of these three major megatrends that we see, and how does this now affect young chefs? I think some of the career planning, some of the, perhaps even the menu planning needs to take these shocks into consideration. And for the perhaps older chefs, the generational renewal needs to be planned now. It needs to really start immediately in order to make sure that the world is going to be fed also tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. And then to support all the young chefs to take the next steps. What else? Any other disruptions? Anything to add here, or?
I think the way people perceive their future careers, COVID hit us all hard. And I think we really struggled to recover from that. You know, it's the norm now to work from home, have condensed working hours, have this more work-life balance, which historically in hospitality, we don't do that. And there's not enough education going around about you can have a fantastic career in culinary, not just take the easy road and take a working from home job. So it's about banging that drum of how rewarding that career could be, because that's where the younger generation now have sort of fallen away from what they want out of a career. You know, they just want an easy life, not so much a reward in life.
Well, yet there's no shortage of, I think, inspiration that even, again, we've seen the last couple days. But I think it's up to us to share that, to support them, and to help them find ways to access these paths.
So what the Heritage Committee, what we found when we have meetings is that we talk about sustainability, we talk about AI, but at the end of the day, when we look at sustainability and heritage, we found that we sort of, if we go back to have a look what we did 50, 60 years ago and how we used to cook 50, 60 years ago, and we can bring that back and teach the younger chefs in being sustainable, because we didn't have access to a lot of food items that we have these days, but still being able to use AI in a certain way that it helps or supports what we're trying to do. So heritage and sustainability, we found it's a really big, works in hand.
Okay, so partly to overcome some of these difficulties then, at least for Chef Peter, you want to go back, let that pendulum swing the other direction, bring us back to our roots of sorts, and
well, we've seen when we talked to the speaker, especially this morning, when we've seen the first speaker, you just go outside and have a look what you find just around the place. So it's going back by still using what we do what we do, but be more sustainable and use, you know, in the 40s and in the 30s, you didn't have access to certain things, but you still had to survive. So our grandparents, if you look at it, they had to still survive, and you used to do potato. You didn't just boil potato every day, you tried something different with it, but have it sustainable, just as an example. So going back to have a look and then modernize, but staying sustainable instead of the other way around, yeah.
Okay, so hopefully you're just inspiring some young chefs to do that now, and we'll keep spreading that word. But what else, for the rest of the panel too, what else should young chefs be doing to overcome these hardships, these disruptions, and what might be perhaps seen as a bigger step than previous generations? What more should they be doing?
I think learn from your mentors, the people you work with. So when you're starting off, you might be quiet and shy, but ask the questions. Your senior chefs will teach you more than any AI can do. It's all about that people and the mentorship. So the younger generation, ask the questions. Don't be afraid. Put yourself out there.
Great advice. Anything else?
Yeah, look, I really, my chefs in my organization, but I think it applies to all chefs, get really deeply involved in the supply chain. That's what I've tried to do as a CEO, to unpick all of the mechanisms. To your point, if we went back 50 years, people would have just been eating seasonally because that was what you had to do. You had a zero waste attitude because that's how you made food last the full week. When you get into some of the intrinsic problems in the agriculture system, not just in the UK, but in America and for the global perspective, we are shipping too much food around the world. We're overly reliant on pesticides. We're overly reliant on lots of artificial fertilizer, which is why we suddenly get the shock when the Strait of Hormuz closes. We should be going back to more regenerative agriculture, should be understanding how and why we treat our animals when we bring animal protein in. We should understand the damage and the pollution that we've done to the ecosystems and how we can help fix it. Because the young chefs, as they come through, if they're doing this with their knowledge, their choice of what ingredient they put on the plate and where they source it from really does have the power to change how we eat and shape our diets.
So you're saying, in other words, look at the big picture.
Look, I think chefs for a long time, certainly when I started off in a kitchen 25 years ago, and we would just get all the vac packed meat, we wouldn't even think where the fruit and veg had come from. We'd have no concept. It was just about getting what looked visually the best and put it on a plate. The conversation has to be a lot more now. If we're putting chicken on a plate, where's that chicken come from? What feed has gone into that chicken? Has that soy-based feed come from deforested parts of the Amazon basin? Has that chicken got a load of antibiotics and other crap in it?
Right.
These are the questions we need our chefs to be asking and be passionate about.
And Kazuki-san, you also do look at food as a system, the multiple overlapping industries, the various roles, where the food comes from, how it gets transported, all the way to how it's served on the plate. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. But perhaps just one additional point to what was just said. All of these disruptions are actually happening not only to your chefs, but they're happening to everybody, to all young people as well, no? And that is also changing consumer behavior. There is also a demand for more sustainable, more perhaps healthier options, and so on. And that is, I think, something also that we can see now coming to your systems thinking systemically in the entire food and agricultural sphere, where the farmers, at least some of them, start to be very conscious of where the next seasons of their food is coming from, when climate is not predictable anymore. In some cases, fertilizers you were just mentioning or pesticides are now disrupted in the global supply chain. So we have to learn how to produce food with less of these types of inputs, and perhaps that's very good. So the change that we see in the system is something that in the end is also going to be felt on the plate. And I think that is why I was saying before, the planning for that, the planning in the menus, the planning on a daily basis, but also the planning of who are you working with, the young people that you want to bring into the industry. I think all of that needs to come together, and that's why I think this discussion is so important.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. The term agents of change, we're talking about evolution of all these industries and the roles. I don't know if some of the young chefs have heard of this term, or if you think of yourselves, or chefs in general think of yourselves as agents of change. But to realize that a chef, either directly or indirectly, imparts or has an effect on I mean, I can't say a number, but I would have to imagine thousands of people in their interactions. Imagine a hotel, executive chef at a hotel, their entire team of staff, every customer, every dish that they put out. They are now influencing an exponential number of people. And so to think of chefs as agents of change, and we've all agreed that things do need to change in various ways, can we elaborate on that a little bit more and put the emphasis on the role of chefs, of us chefs, to really do something about it? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, chefs play an extremely important role as change agents, because in the end of the day, it's the chefs that make a link between the producers and the consumers. And it is the chef's choice in the end to make sure that people are fed with healthy choices, with good choices, with quality choices. So this is in itself already a change making. But then, of course, we are working with young chefs also on community programs, because young chefs in particular can be real role models for youth in a community, with their choices they're making, the discussions they have on zero waste, on zero food waste. We talked about food waste the other day. A third of all of our food is being wasted. That is insane. The chefs can make a huge difference, and having these discussions with other young people, with communities overall, demonstrating it practically how these issues can be addressed. This is change making. Perhaps sometimes it feels small, but it can be a massive butterfly that really brings a big change.
I agree, yeah. Go ahead, Peter.
Probably something not everybody likes to hear, but sometimes I think it's important to listen to what the young chefs have to say as well. So, and I found that in our part of the world, sometimes we do not take on board what the young chefs say. They just, here, another. But instead of actually developing that idea or get them involved in it and make it something a bit enthusiastically, and it then can bring something small into a bigger project. But the importance is get them involved, and I guess it's having all the chefs like me, have them to change the way of thinking that, yes, we used to do it this way and it's always like this. So adapt and let them influence yourself as well to see where you can take. Yes, that's very important that we get in and accept that sometimes, yeah, it's middle of winter, you can't get strawberry, well, you can't get strawberries, but the expectation is that you do.
Maybe for Carla and John, are there ways that you empower chefs to be the agents of change and to become idols, become mentors, become role models in your businesses?
Yep, so we've just started working on a whole talent management piece at the collection, which is all about bringing in tools to help our operators, our culinary expertise, whose main focus is to deliver that service, not necessarily the people. So we're bringing in talent mapping and succession planning and one-to-one meetings. They sound very simple, but we're trying to say, come on, we'll make this nice and quick and easy for you. Have that one-to-one with your team members. Sit down with them. Have a conversation about where they want to go in their career, how we can help you get there. And then that makes that individual more engaged. You know, they enjoy what they're doing, and in turn, it makes it a happier workspace. Your job is easier as the senior in charge because you've got this workforce that have gone, yeah, I'm taking on board everything you're teaching me. I will put in the work because I feel inspired by you because you have taken the time to invest in me.
I think I hope we can all relate to that somehow, that most people will rise up to the challenge. John?
Yeah, look, when you talk about young chefs, how far back do you want to go? I think that's the other question, because we a lot of our chefs, we send them out into local schools, and we have a young chefs academy where if chefs are coming out of school, or potential chefs coming out of school with no knowledge of food or how to cook, and there have been multiple generations, certainly in this country now, who are losing basic cookery skills and are relying on ultra-processed food. You know, in South Wales, we have a huge problem with diabetes and obesity, primarily caused by poor diet and education. So how do we start to fix these problems? So we get into the local schools with our trained chefs, take a group of 13 and 14-year-olds, make them cook simple dishes, really spark that knowledge of what good food looks and can taste like, get them back into our venues. We have Cardiff City down the road where they'll come and work in a proper professional kitchen and really understand it. And I think that's the massive crossover here, because if you can get people thinking about health and their own health, and then chefs unlocking that knowledge to show what good quality, well-prepared, fresh food can do for your own personal well-being and mental health and personal health, that unlocks a huge amount of potential in the future.
It's life-changing. It could be life-changing, right? When someone believes in you and teaches you something like that, and then you feel better, you feel different. Wonderful. Okay, well, I think things like that they would be meaningful. They are always meaningful. To have something, to make it, to create meaning, this is created socially, culturally. And so again, it is up to all of us. It's up to our communities to be able to pass this on and to shape our minds. We learned yesterday it's about mindset first, right? So what else? Are there other collaborations, perhaps across with other sectors? Again, we see a nice diversity here, but through governmental programs or non-governmental programs, NGOs, big corporations, big picture, big dreams, do we see any ideas for how else we can create these meaningful opportunities? Anyone?
Well,
Go ahead,
I can
John.
jump in again. I mean, look, one thing I'm really passionate about is getting chefs back out into nature. So we've funded a project up in Yorkshire where we have a regenerative farm project, and we've sent probably about 2,500 of our people through it, just to spend a couple of days on the land. Because I think, again, if you've grown up in an urban environment, you've been a chef in a kitchen, you're getting these ingredients delivered, but you're not necessarily understanding where they come from. So just to show how food is grown, how animals are raised and grazed, really getting that deep connection back to our soil, I think is so, so important. So we do that not just for our young chefs, but all of our chefs, to really get back and understand the impacts on the soil and the health of the nature. And if we make better purchasing decisions and cooking decisions, how that can be improved.
So you are strengthening your connections to farmers and all these other producers and suppliers. So those types of collaborations and synergies, they work well.
Yeah, I think we've got caught in this sort of maelstrom of lots of middlemen and women in the supply chain, and we've got to cut out all the middle people and get back to the producers and the farmers. I've yet to meet a farmer that doesn't care about their animals and their land, but through purchasing decisions and a lot of add-on costs right the way through the supply chain, they get forced into making the wrong decisions. The consumer, our customer, my chefs, the people at the end of the chain, we just want great quality produce, and we want to pay people a fair price for it. So how do we enable those chefs to really connect with the producers and the farmers and understand the inputs and the outputs that are needed?
So on a local scale, I could say local, I suppose, right, for UK and Ireland, and then those of us in our own regions as well, we can take that away. But what about on a global scale then? Are there other collaboration ideas or synergies that you can see potential that?
Well, I mean, I see collaboration possibilities in all of the different areas, but perhaps let me point out two. One is because not everybody in the world has the privilege of having a plate full of food in front of them, high quality, even I'm leaving this outside. We still have a huge number of people, and in particular children, by the way, who are food insecure. We're talking here billions of people. So this is a lot of people who still have food insecurity. And here, of course, chefs in particular, when it's coming to school feeding activities, support to better meals in schools so that kids can actually learn that they are fed in a right way, that they can start actually building a life. This is where I would really like to see more partnerships, also with chefs in developing countries where this is a major priority. And this is, of course, it's a global issue. I know that there's school feeding issues also in the UK, but there's much bigger issues in some other parts of the world. So that's one. The other area where I would really like to see more partnerships also with chefs is in the preservation, but perhaps also revitalization of heritage. And food heritage is something that actually gets lost almost on a daily basis. In some parts of the world, partnerships with indigenous groups, with indigenous peoples could be a way out. But this is an area where I think we have not put enough spotlight, where perhaps we can also learn a lot from forgotten crops, from forgotten varieties that indigenous peoples are still using on a daily basis. So these are just two partnerships where I could immediately see something, and this is just two of many, you know.
Two of many, and I think each of us can go back to our own home countries and explore these types of opportunities. But to the point about practicing it, or else it'll disappear. If we're not aware of it, we don't share it, we don't gather at the table, it will be gone. Traditions, rituals, foods themselves, right? Peter?
Well, what we're trying to do as well is working with the schools, because if you start with high schools, we found the reward comes later on, but we go to schools and simple, we get our suppliers to give us products and just go to school and say, this is a carrot, this is a leek, this is celery, and lots of them don't even know where they come from, you know? Milk comes from the supermarket. That's what the answer sometimes you get. So if we start to educate them at the last years at school, or they start to think about it and get them interested in food, I think that's where we get our numbers up as well for chefs in the future, because if not, we're talking now as well to the big mining companies, especially in Western Australia. They always want the best chefs, but at some point, where are you going to get them? So we want them to get involved in these programs where they assist us in promoting the young chefs, so we get the numbers up and we actually can do what we need to do.
As a young chef mentor, I would be remiss if I did not turn to my wonderful group of young chefs here and say, who has a question? Who has been taking notes? Who's been inspired by something that one of the panelists have said? Can we put the question, and to the whole audience, in fact, but of course I have a slight soft spot for these people over here. Does anyone have a question? Should we extend the conversation? Is that Ethan? I can't see. Yes. Do we need it? Okay. Oh, thank you. I know you have questions. I know it.
How do we balance the speed of... Oh, do you want me to just wait for the microphone? I'm so eager, though. Hello, thank you. I've written down a question. I just wanted to ask, it's for anyone who wants to answer, how do we balance the speed of service and industry standards with sustainable and eco-friendly choices? I know for me, whenever I'm when I'm in service, I'm usually in the shit, and I've got my prep list, and I'm just chucking things in the bin just to get out of the way, but is there any advice I can just make? That's a joke, by the way, I don't do that. But give me a job. But is there any advice you can give to young chefs or anyone who wants to make sustainable and eco-friendly choices in their process, but necessarily can't reach those industry standards and the speed of service?
Oh.
I don't mind going. If we're talking about production waste in a kitchen, I think if anyone hasn't heard of Doug, who used to run Silo restaurant in London, Silo is an amazing concept, actually started in Australia, and Doug brought it over, where he was the first restaurant in London not to have bins. And he actually invented a process, and we're working with him, and he was at a chef competition we ran last week in Birmingham, where we're trying to teach these kids now how to understand what production waste can be. Because he went into micro detail around, for example, creating garums, fermentations, precision fermentation, and the kind of flavors he was getting out of it, which would have been just waste product that would have gone into the bin or maybe gone into composting, and over time created sauces and stocks and infusions that are, some of the food I ate at Silo is some of the best I've ever eaten, full stop. And the skill level that goes into it. And now he's researching things like goji, where he's growing goji on industrial scale, using that as a product to then enhance and flavor food. That this could have been waste rice, rice that's been cooked off. He's cooking with the goji off the rice to make ice cream, which is completely dairy-free and vegan alternatives. It's all about getting into the science of the food itself and what you can do with it. And really, I appreciate all this takes time, but if you're a chef and you're enthusiastic and you're knowledgeable and you want to push yourselves, doing what you can with that waste product, I think is far more inspiring than just taking a fillet steak and cooking it. Anyone can do that. How do you create something ingenious out of something that would have been wasted?
Mm-hmm. You can make it your expertise. Just experiment a little, right? You'll be up here on stage in a few years, right? Okay, thank you. Do we have other questions for the panel about how the industry, about the disruptions?
Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. President. Sorry, Mr. President. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. Sorry, this question is for Jonathan again. I was really interested when you said that there's a gap in education when it comes to training young chefs about regenerative agriculture alongside responsible animal husbandry. So I really like the points that you made about educating young chefs about that. But how do we do it in terms of integrating it actually in our current educational systems, locally, but also globally, widespread?
Yeah, look, that's the million-dollar question, right? How do you get everyone interested in learning about these systemic changes that we need in the agricultural and food system? I think if you start from the point that we've made a lot of missteps as an industry and as an agricultural system for the last 50, 60 years, and we do need to dial back time a little bit here. But there are competing macro trends that are happening at the same time. Everyone sometimes, I go back to GLP-1s, people are a bit scared of GLP-1s. I'm not on the drugs, I'm not promoting the drugs, I have no interest in those manufacturers, but what it is doing is making people move away from over-processed food, moving into high protein, high fiber, real ingredients. So that gives us an opportunity then to say, okay, if you're interested in the health of your body, because a lot of my customers would say, yeah, sustainability, the health of the planet, yeah, that's important, but I still just want to eat what I want to eat. Well, actually, there's this great Venn diagram, I think, of what's good for the planet and is good for our own body. In the middle, actually a lot of these ingredients, a lot of these stories, a lot of this education can come from just cooking decent quality, fresh products. A lot of the magic in this is about animal protein and how we can re-educate people about, moving away from mass-produced industrial meat into, we're a massive proponent and we're trying to do a nationwide campaign in the UK and Ireland about wild venison at the moment. This is a perfect ingredient that sits in that Venn diagram. It's full of omega-3s. It's the only animal in our food chain that eats a wild diet that isn't farmed. It's massively lean. It's hugely high in protein. So it's hitting all of the health benefits. And then on the nature side, you're talking about an animal that's creating biodiversity loss right across the Highlands of Scotland, well, right across the UK at the moment. There's 2 million wild venison. We can sustain a population of about 300,000 to 400,000. So every time a chef cooks wild venison, they're actually helping the biodiversity and the ecology of this country. These are the kind of interesting conversations. I'm interested in rope-grown mussels, where the creation of that mussel shell is taking carbon out of our acidified seas. And by using rope-grown mussels, you're having a direct impact on small impact, but if everyone does it and every chef gets behind it, these are the mass movements that we need to inspire and teach. And it goes back to ingredient and supply chain. It's always about the ingredient and supply chain. If we can get that right, we can change things.
Mm.
Perhaps one example as well on this is a project that we are piloting this year. It's, we call it the Young Chefs Program, so very similar to yours, and perhaps we can have an exchange between the two groups of young chefs. But on the side of the FAO, we're having a one-year training course actually for young chefs specifically on all of these different areas of agriculture, food systems, and so on. And also to better understand the shocks that may be ahead, but also to to be able to actually train others. And this program is split in 3 parts. The first is more front learning about the different aspects from agroforestry all the way to water use and so on. The second part is to think about in your own area, in your own community, what is a project that you would like to do? It can be, I would like to, we have, for instance, one that is doing a presentation in schools, bringing young kids closer to a better understanding of food, of where food is coming from, about nutrition, and so on. So it could be anything that is linking to your community. And the third part is then we support the implementation of that, the realization of that project. And what we saw was that when you make it very, well, first, knowledge is essential, but when you make it practical around areas where you have actually an influence, where you have agency, where you can actually do something, the learning that comes out of that as well can be enormous, and that's where perhaps we can have an exchange between the young chefs, Rosalind.
Absolutely. I can attest to those, the series of master classes and the Young Chef the mentorship program. I'm mentoring a young chef from the US at the moment, and we are taking part in all these series of activities. And I can direct everyone to the World Food FAO website, World Food Forum. There's a lot of materials there as you're describing for your further research and maybe next iteration program and exchange, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
Wonderful.
Looking at Jasper, wherever he is.
Wonderful. Do we just have a couple minutes left? I know we're sitting between the lunchtime here. Yes, Peter.
Quick one. So I'd like to just mention the eating out of home is growing so fast. So we're eating far more meals out of home, which means we have far more restaurants, bistros, stadiums, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for the business leaders, we don't have enough culinarians at the moment. And you did breach on some of the things you do for your teams to keep them, to invest in them. But if we go to the future, cooking up the future is the theme, and we have all the young chefs here. How do we embrace getting more people into the industry? But more importantly, how do we keep them? How do we, like the mentoring program, it's sort of like every new person who starts needs a mentor straight away from day one to protect them and keep them interested. I hear people, oh, what are you doing now? Oh, I'm a carpenter now. I can make $30 an hour, and I can go home at 3 PM, blah, blah, blah. Why would I be a chef? So in cooking for the future, the business leaders here, you're nodding your head, you're sort of saying, well, the need for chefs is going to increase dramatically. As we pivot away from junk food, QSR meals, people are more invested in their bodies and their well-being and all that. They want to eat proper food instead of, packaged and processed and all that sort of stuff, which then puts demand back on young chefs, which means they're under more pressure, and then, we get to the burnout project and all that sort of stuff. So, business leaders go away with that thought. How do we continue to invest, but, think of 5 years, 10 years, 15-year plans as the out-of-home eating, growth just keeps on continuing. But that's my question.
How do we retain the chefs for the longevity of their careers and not just get them hired and forget about them, but maintain their development? Maybe Carla has some thoughts.
I think we need to be honest from the get-go. So when we're going into schools, we're going into universities, we are trying to speak to people about what a future in culinary will look like. It's being real with them, not painting this false image that you can sometimes see on, especially, like social media. Say to them, yeah, it's long hours, it's hard work, but these are the rewards you get out of it. And it's going into schools, doing like a cooking demo and doing a question and answer with some kids. They might ask you some ridiculous things, but if you can spark that one person who's interested in it, they'll come in, you give them your all and they'll give you their all. And it's working with the people professionals in your industries as well, so where you're from, and saying, you guys need to support me more. You know, you're telling me to be a mentor, to do one-to-ones, do talent conversations. How do you expect me to do all of that? And it's not sticking to the, do an appraisal once a year, ask the same 20 questions. It's mixing it up, and people professionals need to work more with the operation to understand how we can help you, how we can be a support to you, to then get the next generation to come in, love it, and stay in it.
Thank you.
And I guess as well, listen to what they say and act on, you know, just not just listen and then put it aside. So if you do an appraisal once every year, you know, I got appraisals done on maybe for years, but nothing happened. So I eventually just give up. So what's the point? So if you do an appraisal with them, you give them the positive feedback, they give you feedback, but do something with her so they can see you actually interested. And I guess if we show them that we're interested in their progress, then it works both ways as well.
Okay, well, maybe we should leave it at that. I encourage you to continue these discussions over lunch and over the next, all the other social gatherings. Thank you so much for the panel to join, and that we see a nice cross-sector of industries with the focus on all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosalind. Where's Jasper? We're not finished yet, so don't leave. We're not finished yet, so don't leave. Thank you, leadership. Old guys. Unless you've got to do the lunch service like Arwen. He has permission. I just want to share a little thing about Jasper and Rosalind. Jasper was one of the first international young chefs I ever interacted with in Singapore. And Jasper, along with Rosalind, have been on the development team from the very beginning. And it fills me with pride that I see Jasper standing up in front of us, telling us what to do. Because people like Jasper, thank you very much, panel, Rosalind,